is the Celebrity Afterlife Report podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Celebrity Afterlife Report for the first week of February 2015. I'm your host, the Celebrity Medium. As always, I have a roundup of the hottest, most up-to-the-minute gossip about your favorite deceased celebrities to tell you. And with that out of the way, let's get this show on the road. In last week's report, I told you that former Earthly Plane televangelist Jerry Falwell had outraged many of his fellow citizens of the next world by announcing that he wanted to erect a giant sign reading Holy Land, similar to the famous Hollywood sign, on the top of a hill just outside one of the Afterlife's cities. Now, there is no formal religion of any kind in the next world, so many people were scratching their heads wondering just what Falwell was up to. Even with so much opposition to his plan, it was still surprising when Falwell's fellow former TV preacher Oral Roberts wrote a guest editorial in the newspaper published by Walter Cronkite. One quote from the editorial, as told to me by one of my Afterlife paparazzi sources, stood out in particular. "It's over, Jerry. The game is over. We're not on Earth anymore. How about you just drop it and enjoy your new existence," Roberts wrote. Now, that quote has set a lot of tongues wagging. Was Roberts admitting that he, Falwell, and the rest of their brethren were just fakes and frauds? Or was he trying to tell Jerry to just chill out? Or whatever he may have meant by it, Roberts isn't saying. When a reporter caught up with him and asked him about his advice to Falwell, he replied, "The piece speaks for itself. No comment." If you'll recall, I told you on the previous report that Next World residents were buzzing about the way New York Yankees legend-turned Afterlife radio shock jock Babe Ruth welcomed, quote-unquote, former Chicago Cub player Ernie Banks to the next world. The host of the popular morning show, along with his cast, made fun of everything from Banks' height to his race to the alleged size of his manhood, facing a storm of criticism about what many, including some members of the press, called his unforgivable treatment of the new arrival. Ruth invited Banks to appear on his show. Banks accepted, and the much-anticipated face-to-face happened a few days ago. According to my sources, things started off well enough with Ruth making a non-apology apology to Banks, saying that his comments were all in good fun, that it's just what his show does to everyone, etc. Ernie seemed to be taking Ruth's perhaps phony contrition with grace. Then things got interesting. My sources tell me that Banks' tone changed suddenly, and he started laying into Ruth and his co-host, the late Moms Mabley. From what I was told, most of what Banks said about the two of them is unsuitable for this podcast. But I can tell you that he made several references to an incident from the Bambino's past. When Ruth was playing for the Yankees, he was off the lineup for several days once, recovering from what the team's front office said was a stomachache from eating too many hot dogs. The rumor has always been that he was actually being treated for an STD. My sources say that Ernie made several hilariously crude references to the incident. What made Banks' tirade all the more shocking is that last week, as reported here, when he was asked about Ruth's jokes about him, he blew it off, saying that life is too short to get upset about that kind of thing. Now, whether Ernie had a change of heart about Ruth's jabs, or he deliberately adopted a nonchalant attitude about them so he could ambush Babe when he faced him, we may never know. Either way, nice work, Slugger. As I've mentioned on past editions of the report, people in the afterlife are generally aware of events taking place on the earthly plane. It's not surprising, therefore, that a lot of Next World residents were excited about the Super Bowl between the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots. Like many fans still alive, some in the afterlife are blaming Seattle's loss on their coach not taking one of his team's 2 remaining timeouts when it was needed. A Next World TV crew was covering fans' reactions to the game at a popular sports bar when the reporter spotted legendary coach Vince Lombardi in the crowd. Asked what he thought of Pete Carroll's decision, Lombardi was blunt. "If I owned the Seahawks, I would have fired him before the game was over," he said. Now, since Vince seemed in the mood to talk, the reporter asked him what he thought about the recent Penn State scandal. "It's simple. You touch a kid, you're dead to me," the coach replied. And lastly, former heavyweight boxing champion Joe Frazier transitioned to the afterlife this past week. One of my Next World informants was in the crowd waiting to welcome Smokin' Joe to his new existence. He asked Joe if he had any ideas about what he'd like to do now that he is in the afterlife. The champ said he'd like to develop a product like George Foreman did with his famous As Seen on TV grill so he could make millions. When my informant told Foreman that there is no need for money in the next world, the boxer seemed taken aback. "My bad," he said. "I guess you'll have to get back to me about that." Unquote. And with that, I prepare to lock the doors of the Celebrity Afterlife Report studio for another week. Please come back next time for more up-to-the-minute gossip about all your favorite-to-see celebrities. And please be sure to tell your friends that the report can now be found on iTunes. I am the Celebrity Medium. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Celebrity Afterlife Report podcast. To ask a question about your favorite deceased celebrity, call 818-3-MY-DREAM. 818-3-MY-DREAM. 818-369-3732.